Hello, welcome to Marketplace. We're so happy that you're here. One of the things I wanted to mention before we start is to please silence your phones. You are welcome to tweet, take Instagram pictures, but please make sure your phone is on silent. My name is Nancy Fergali. I am a senior producer of special projects at Marketplace, and this is, I think, our 6th year here. It's also our 25th anniversary on air, so you can clap. Yay. I wanted to take time to introduce a few people that make the show possible that you'll actually not see on stage. Deborah Clark is our vice president and executive producer. In the back, we have Zach Rose, one of our engineers, Millie Jefferson, wave Millie, and Charlton Thorpe. And I also would like to thank Aspen for hosting us again. It's always a great festival. So without further ado, welcome to Marketplace.
All right, you guys, let's get going. Chrissy, what do you got? We got to get going here.
Okay, I've got a story that we need to do.
All right.
It involves corporate secrets, strange bedfellows. I've been finishing up the investigation I was working on about the food stamp economy. So we need to do this story. It's going to change people's perspectives, I think.
All right. Patty, what?
Well, I agree that that's a story.
Yeah.
But this is the story.
What's
right?
that?
3 words.
Okay.
Gross domestic product.
Okay.
Otherwise known as lies, damned lies, and possibly the biggest statistic out there.
All right.
GDP. If you don't trust numbers, it's the gift that keeps on giving all year long.
We'll give it a try. Adrian, what do you like?
You guys, come on. Consumer economy, that is our story today. How many times on this show have we said this economy is built on consumer spending?
All the time.
70% of this economy.
All the time.
I got a fistful of numbers. I think that's our story today.
If you guys promise not to tell anybody, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Yes, Marketplace is a program about business and the economy, and we do the numbers on the broadcast every single day. Yeah, that's not what I'm talking about. I hear those numbers like in my night. Okay, no, not that one. It's not that one either. Listen, the fact is we are a program on business and the economy, so we kind of have to use the numbers every day. Shall we say that? But it's not just stocks and bonds, right? We got big numbers and small numbers. We have leading indicators and lagging indicators. We have government statistics and corporate profits. We have trend analysis and spot news analysis. We've got all kinds of numbers. But the secret really is this. We've been doing this a long time, 25 years at Marketplace this year. And the fact is that numbers, A, are hard, and B, they can be boring, right? If you just take a number and you put it in a news headline, or if you just put it in a news spot without anything around it, without telling you why it's there, that's all you got. It's just a number. But if you take that number and you put it in context, you give it a sense of place, well then you've got something. You know which numbers to use, which ones to leave alone, and what to do with the ones you got. So tonight, a sneak peek behind how we learn to stop worrying and love the numbers. So to review, as the strains of Dr. Strangelove fade out. To review, bright and early every morning, 7:30 on the dot, we gather in the conference room back at Marketplace World Headquarters in Los Angeles, and we start to sift. We sift news stories. We sift angles for Marketplace, because you can't do everything, right? And we sift the data. We sift the numbers. Now, you can't do all the numbers either. There's just too many of them. But there is a list, a set of big numbers that you kind of have to do. You have to touch on them. And right at the top of that list is something called gross domestic product, the sum and total of what we do in an economy every single year. And here to start us off with that is Patty Hirsch. She's our senior editor for our New York bureau, also the host of the Marketplace Whiteboard. Patty, how are you?
I'm well, thanks, Kai.
All right.
So I guess I won the pitch meeting, huh?
You did. You win. Yeah. You get to start.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a small win.
It's a small win,
All right.
but, got to start somewhere.
That's
so before we talk about this revered and apparently sacrosanct indicator, right, gross domestic product, I need to know if you have a Facebook page.
A what?
A Facebook page.
Yes, I do.
Oh, you do?
I do.
Actually, I already knew that.
All right.
Here it is. Look, he looks good, doesn't he?
Wow.
Yes.
Well, that's my latest headshot, by the way.
I love that window pane on that jacket.
I know.
It looks expensive.
I went with no tie. I hope that's all right.
So we've got, on the left here, we've got some information about you. You've got where you lived, where
Yep.
you studied. Where do you work, though?
Everybody knows where I work, Patty.
All right,
Come on.
fair enough.
Right?
All right, well, we've got some nice photos of you here, and you've got lots of friends, clearly. Your life looks pretty good.
Yeah.
So given the fact that Facebook is the face that we present to the world, would you say that this page is an accurate reflection of the life of Kai Ryssdal in all its pain and glory?
All right, well, honestly, no, right? I mean, it's not.
No, there's no spilled milk, no brawling children, no recalcitrant colleagues. It's a carefully pruned version of your life. It's a bit like a country's GDP.
Okay, how?
Well, because a country can pretty much choose whatever it likes to put into its GDP, just like you can choose pretty much whatever you want to put on your Facebook page.
But you heard me up at the top, right? GDP is the sum and total of all the goods and services in an economy in a year. It's not like you just wing it.
No, that's true. It certainly is that.
Yeah.
The question is, what constitutes a good or a service?
Okay.
Right, this is a question that can be interpreted in pretty much any way you like.
All right.
Let's take an imaginary place. Let's call it Westeros.
Nice.
Is that taken? I guess.
Yes.
Well, here's Westeros's Facebook page. And you can see that GDP last year was about $2 trillion.
Okay.
And you can see what its main industries are here.
Yep.
We've got gold and silver mining. That's the Lannisters. So I hear gold is a little bit down these days.
Yeah.
Is that spoiler? Sorry.
Hey, now, come on. I'm on a la-la-la.
I
no
know you're a fan. I know. You're a bit behind. Anyway, we've got fishing, winemaking, Valerian steel making, production of cash crops like wheat, corn, and sugarcane, and of course, tourism.
Such a lovely place Westeros is, right?
Indeed.
But if you run that math there, Patty, that's not 100%.
No, that's true. The rest is smaller industries and services.
Okay.
Now, let's take domestic services. Is this you? Oh, no, what's a like?
I don't know.
Say you decided to become a cleaner. What you earn every year cleaning houses would contribute to GDP, right?
It absolutely would.
Right. But if you clean your own house, does that contribute to GDP?
No, it's me picking up after my kids.
Right, you're not getting paid, right?
Right.
But you are providing a service to a household which does have value.
That is true.
Now, I talked about this with Diane Coyle. She's the author of a little book called GDP, A Brief But Affectionate History. And she says the main reason we don't include paid housework as part of the economy is because of the difficulty in measuring it.
Well, difficulty isn't the right word. It can be measured in surveys, like many economic statistics. But generally, official statistical agencies have never bothered. Perhaps because it's being carried out mainly by women.
Somewhat contentious,
Right, yep.
you might say. But male or female, regardless, this notion of valuing services has always been contentious, right? The late, great Adam Smith, in my opinion anyway, held that all services are unproductive, and this includes financial services, by the way. So economists in different countries have included different services in their GDP. Just like people with their Facebook pages, you put in the stuff that makes you look good. Like Westeros. Here is a post showing that Westeros has decided to add money lending to its GDP. And look, it suddenly pushes the GDP up by another $3 billion.
First of all, I love the Joffrey Baratheon right there in the middle. But that's kind of random, right? They can't just pick something and just go zip, right?
Well, it sounds to me like you need a real-world example.
Okay, hit me with it.
All right. So here's Diane Coyle again, this time talking about Italy, which in 1987 decided to start including an estimate of the country's unofficial economy in its GDP.
It increased the size of the economy by about a fifth, taking Italy past the United Kingdom to become the fifth largest economy in the world, just behind France at number 4. It was labeled Il Sorpasso, the overtaking.
Il Sorpasso. What is an unofficial economy, though, right? I mean, come on.
Well, in another phrase, it's the black market, right? It's all the business done under the table in that country. So let me read from the New York Times now. A wave of euphoria swept over Italians after economists recalibrated their statistics, taking into account for the first time the country's formidable underground economy of tax evaders and illegal workers.
So what I hear you saying is you could put anything in there you want.
That's absolutely right. If you keep your eye on the news, you'll see that the United Kingdom is about to add £10 billion a year to its GDP based on the value of services provided by, wait for it, prostitutes and drug dealers.
10 billion pounds, $16 billion. You're doing nothing for my confidence in gross domestic product.
I'm deadly serious about this. Look, put that in your Facebook page. There you go.
All right, yeah. That's crazy. So do I not believe that? What do I do here, Pat?
Listen, I hope I'm not eroding your confidence in GDP too much. I'm not saying it's not to be trusted, right? It's the best number that we have to measure the growth of the economy. But you need to view it in context. I mean, take this prostitution and drug dealing thing.
Yep.
All EU countries are going to have to factor that in. Is the US going to follow suit? Is China? I mean, that would mean admitting that such activities exist, for one thing.
So that is to say, right, that if everybody's counting different things, then you can't make the apples to apples comparison between our economy and France or whoever.
That's exactly right. And the other reason to be wary of GDP is because the market, as you know, often moves sharply up or down when the GDP number comes out.
I do know that. You know, we have a show. It's called Marketplace.
Indeed, and we follow it very carefully.
Yes,
and the problem is with this is that this number is wrong.
Well, okay, you say wrong. I think what you mean is it's an estimate. They're guessing.
All right, maybe that's a little too strong, but it's an estimate, all right.
Yeah.
But it's one that will later be revised and then revised again. I mean, only this week we got growth figures for the first quarter of the year. The economy, you can see from here on the board here, the economy shrank at an annual rate of nearly 3%. But that was the third estimate that we got this week of first quarter GDP.
Right.
The first estimate came back in April. As you can see, it said that the economy grew at an annual rate of 0.1%. Look at the difference.
Big change, and I'm guessing somebody blamed the weather,
Yeah,
right?
well, actually, they did blame the weather, A little bit of healthcare blame as well, but mainly the weather. But you can't blame the weather for the constant disparity in GDP estimates. They're not usually quite this large, but they are never the same, and I mean never. The first number released by the Commerce Department has not once ever matched the revision.
What do you want me to do? Ignore it then?
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that we should be wary of setting too much store by what happens in the market when GDP data comes out. You know, these gyrations are a reaction to the bets that people have made to what they think the GDP growth rate might be, not a reaction to what the growth rate actually is. So the plain fact is that GDP is still the best statistic that we have about the state of the economy and its growth. But it is only good as the data that goes into it. We need to remember that, like you and I with our Facebook pages, at least
me,
maybe.
Yeah.
Countries leave a lot out, right, in order to make themselves look good. So use GDP by all means, but please take it with a large pinch of salt.
Salt, by the way, in the American economy last year, $1.6 billion, 0.009% of GDP. Patty Hirsch. Thank you, Patty.
Okay.
So the numbers we talk about tonight, get an MC, Tony, are not just about the bottom line of the economy, the big picture of gross domestic product. These numbers can often drive behavior, how we act, what we choose, and sometimes they start us down a path that one might consider a little off, maybe a little odd, but we'll get there in a minute. Case in point, thermostats. Our next guest, Tony Fadell, is the co-founder and CEO of Nest. It is a company that is, I think it's fair to say, reinventing household products, right?
We're trying.
All right. First of
all,
all, thank you for coming on the show. We appreciate you giving your time.
Thanks, Kai.
I want to start with a really big number. I was reading up on you and the research you did before you founded this company called Nest, which is literally reinventing household thermostats, among other things. There are plus or minus 250 million thermostats in operation in this country?
That's right.
Plus or minus? Okay.
250 million.
And the industry standard name brand, has been around since 1953, unchanged.
That's right.
That's what you call an opportunity, right?
Absolutely.
So explain your product for us.
So literally, the thermostat that we make is a Nest Learning thermostat, and we're trying to serve the 250 million thermostats in the country. And what we do is it's a thermostat that looks beautiful. So first of all, we want to make sure you pay attention to it. So don't ignore the one that they're the ugly plastic thing. But what we do is literally you install it yourself. 95% of them are installed themselves, and you just turn it up and down, and we learn from your behavior.
And it gets smart.
It gets smart because it's how you train it. You don't have to do anything. Typically, most thermostats are not programmed. Even though they are supposed to be programmed to help you save energy, they're not. So it's literally less than 8% are actually programmed to save any energy. So what we do, instead of having you program it, because your life changes, all you do is just change the dial, and then it learns from that, and then it says, if you like 72 at 8 a.m. on a Monday, maybe you like 72 on Tuesday, and definitely the next Monday you'll probably want it 72, and then it just learns and tracks that behavior.
Very quick little story. As we were sitting here waiting for the show to start, Patty Hirsch pulled out his iPhone and said, listen, I've got a problem with my Nest. And he pulled up the app from here, looked at Patty's house in L.A., and diagnosed the problem. I mean, it's kind of a bananas and yet so simple sort of thing.
Very simple.
Yeah. Talk to me for a second about the difference a single degree in Fahrenheit makes in your decision-making on trying to start this company. I mean, there was a fundamental reality
So if you look at it, if you just change your, it depends on your climate zone, but just 1 degree can save you between 4 and 5% in your energy bill. Right. You know, depending on whether you have electricity or gas or what have you. But it's about, on average, about 4 to 5%. Just 1 degree, if you can just shave that off. Most people say, I need it to be 72. Well, could it be 71? When you're heating instead of 72, and you could save 4 or 5%. So what can we do with algorithms and technology, and also what we have as bonus points? We have a little leaf that comes up when you're actually selecting a energy-saving temperature just outside your comfort zone to help you save that 4 or 5 or maybe 20%.
And we're doing a little bit of saving the planet here. I mean, not to,
a lot. You know, just in the 3 years we've been on, and we're in just over a million homes now. We've saved over 2.5 billion kilowatt hours. 2.5 billion kilowatt hours equals about 30 minutes of the U.S. energy consumption. We've saved that. And we're in just a fraction of the homes. There's 110 million homes out there.
Yeah.
So.
I know you're not big on this phrase, but this does seem to be the embodiment of the Internet of Things, this idea that we will all be somehow connected to all the stuff in our house, whether it's a fridge or whatever.
Right. Well, you know, if you look at it, you're already connected. You're connected through these things.
Right.
And so this is going to be the primary interface to your world. You're already doing it today. You're getting an Uber, right? You're emailing, you're tweeting, what have you. This is the primary interface to the world. Your car is going to change, your home's going to change, your office is going to change because of this. And that's what we think is what we think we're doing with the products inside the home, is making sure that this is controlling that.
It occurs to me you now know when Patty gets up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, when he's not, when he's not when he's not home.
Sorta.
Right? I mean, you know things about us because of this.
Yes. Yes, and you're worried. Yeah, well, we also know it, we also know it from where you are with these.
Yeah.
So it's we don't know exactly who's home. We don't know a lot of things. We know somebody's present. But with these, you really know a lot more.
Yeah.
So, it's going to take, most people, I'm sure, have one of these in their pockets, and you wouldn't give it up for anything. And
not for my kids, man.
Exactly. And so think about this in your house after you've saved a lot of money and it's doing things for you on your behalf. You're going to start seeing it's an invaluable convenience and also money-saving technology. So you're going to also weigh that off, that trade-off with, us being able to sort of know what you're doing, but we really don't.
Who's your competition?
Who's our competition?
Yeah.
I think it's really complacency. The first and foremost thing is complacency. People have ignored their thermostats. They don't care, what have you. What we want to do is get over that complacency. Make sure people say, this is important. 50 to 60% of your energy bill that you pay annually goes to heating and cooling your home. What if you could save 20 or 30% of that? People just don't understand that it's really 50 to 60%, because you just get an energy bill at the end of the month. You have no idea where it's being consumed. But literally, it is heating and cooling is the biggest part.
You're a guy with a reputation in Silicon Valley, right? I mean, you spent time at Apple.
25 years.
Okay, really? What, did you start when you were like 9?
21. 2020.
You spent time at Apple. You developed lots of great products there. Tell me, though, about the first time you went to the venture capitalists and said, I need $5 million to do a thermostat.
Well,
right?
Actually, because of my, it was a very different experience than I had raising money before my Apple experience.
Yeah, I bet.
So after Apple and after iPod and iPhone, literally they were just like, because I was semi-retired, we would go on bike rides together and people would try to hand me checks on the bike. So
it's a nice problem to have,
yeah,
man.
I didn't have quite an issue with raising money or bidding a team. I just had to make sure we had a good idea and good business. But before that, very, very difficult.
Let me ask a question related to what you talked about, the device. You want people to pay attention to it, right? How important is design in consumer adoption of a product?
I think it's about experience, right? It's the design experience from when you heard about the brand and you heard about the product till putting it on, installing it, putting it on your wall and learning and using it. So for us, it's incredibly important, because if we don't care about it, if you don't care how it looks, then no one else is going to care either. We try to put a lot of extra time, energy, and love, passion into these products so that you feel that you're like, there's something special here. Because if there's something special here, you're going to take notice, and you might learn from that product. You might use it. You might tell friends about it. So for us, it's really, really important that we get design right in every stage of the customer touch points.
I know you're going to tell me that it's going to pay for itself in 2 or 3 years or whatever it is, but
Depends on your habits.
There's another number that comes with this product, and that's $295.
$249.
Sorry, 49. I'm a little dyslexic tonight, right? It's not a cheap gizmo to stick on your wall to tell you when to turn the air conditioning on.
Yes, that is true. But if you look at in Texas, you can get them free. If you can go to Georgia, you get them free. You can get $50, $200, $50, $100, $150 rebates because they actually really do save. You can go to our white papers. You can see, and our energy calculator. Depending on where you live and your habits, it'll pay for itself in 3 months, or on average about 14 months.
Very quickly before I let you go, you have the thermostat, you have the Nest Protect, the smoke detector and CO2 detector. What's next then as you grow your enterprise?
Well, we just announced last week that we acquired DropCam, which is a security camera and an awareness camera for your home. So we're going to be...
It's more knowing where we are in the middle of the night, man.
But people love to check it. They want to see what their dog's doing when they're not home. They want to see what their cat's doing. Seriously, I'm not kidding. It's really powerful.
Tony Fadell of Nest. Tony, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Kai.
Appreciate it. Be good. So we will continue now on the subject of innovation. When something comes along that kind of redefines what we think we know about the numbers. House of Cards is where we're going here. It is the series that launched Netflix as a major player in the entertainment industry. It changed our television viewing habits. Binge watching, admitted. You do it. I know you do. But what's interesting, though, is that the show is also challenging a television mainstay. That is to say, ratings and how much they matter. Eyeballs, that all-important age demographic, 18 to 49. This guy sitting right here is the one who did it, Beau Willimon. He's the writer, executive producer, showrunner is the phrase of House of Cards. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
He's had a tough afternoon. He just spent an hour with Michael Eisner, so if he's a little wrung out, you are maybe the ultimate how I learned to stop worrying and love the numbers, because on that issue of ratings, Netflix, which knows granularly what its customers do, does not share that information with you, the guy who put it on the map in content.
I know virtually nothing.
Does that not make you...
So we're done, right?
Yeah, no, thanks for coming. Doesn't that make you crazy?
No, I love it. Look, the problem with creativity and where it brushes up against numbers, particularly as it has to do with the commodification of an artistic endeavors, that those numbers can lead to either forced choices that have nothing to do with the creative process, or conversely, coming from the creative side, a form of pandering because you become obsessed with those numbers and try to cater to them. So I don't have to deal with any of that.
The criticism goes, if you as the showrunner would see that viewers respond significantly to one plot point, you would just repeat that endlessly so that they would keep coming back to that and watching that show, right?
Yeah, or I could say, I'm just going to mess with that almost out of spite in a way, right? Like, this if people are asking for this one character more and more and more, I don't want to feel like I'm pandering, so therefore I might intentionally do the opposite unless I'm getting corporate pressure or whatever. I think that all that really matters from my perspective is that clearly whatever numbers exist that Netflix knows on a granular level are enough to make them happy. And if they're happy, that means that they have a business model that's working for them. That's all I need to know.
Did you know going in that Ted Sarandos, the head of content at Netflix, was not going to share that data with you?
No, we weren't entirely sure. I mean, when we sat down with Ted and Cindy Holland for the first time, they said, we're going to give you 2 seasons guaranteed, which was pretty groundbreaking at the time. It still is. And they said, we're going to give you creative freedom. We believe in the team and what you guys want to make. Go and do your thing. We knew what sort of access they had to this incredible reservoir of data. I mean, we sat down with their sort of chief mastermind who told us like how much that they can find out just from your viewing habits. But they were pretty emphatic from the get-go that they weren't going to heap this stuff on top of us. We didn't know how much we'd get. And I do get a certain amount of data, but I to this day, I can't tell you how many Americans have watched House of Cards.
Lots,
or at
lots
what times.
Or, show of hands, come on. Anybody? Yeah, there you go.
A lot of it's anecdotal.
Yeah.
For me.
You alluded to it. There's another number that is really significant. You have said about this program, the guaranteed 2-season deal you got. Why did that matter to you so much as the creative guy?
See, for me, that matters a lot more than releasing all the episodes on one day, which is really just responding to a trend that was already under the way when you started to have subscription services like HBO, where numbers like ratings ceased to become as important for a whole host of reasons. But for me, knowing that I had 26 hours meant that I had a broad canvas that I could paint on. I knew that there were things I could lay in early on in season 1 that might not fully come back to the end of season 2, so you can really delve deeper into characters. You don't feel rushed. You don't have to force big cliffhangers or jump the shark in order to try to make something dramatic happen unorganically, the way that some shows feel the pressure to because they're in a ratings game week to week fighting for their life.
Yeah. This is, as a lot of people know, a remake of a BBC series from 5 plus
Not a
years ago.
remake. It's
Okay. Reconception? What is it? Go ahead.
I'd call it a reinvention. A remake for me, is, or a pure adaptation, is just saying, okay, we're going to try to do exactly what they did. We might try to update it a little bit, different accents. We used it as a jumping off point. So, I mean, you have to realize that in our first season alone, 13 hours of content was more than all 3 seasons of the BBC version combined. And the BBC version actually was based on novels written by Lord Michael Dobbs. So we're all thieving from, and Dobbs was thieving from Richard III a little bit. So, it's a long line of professional thieves that are,
proudly, one might say. Proudly. All right, tell us the story then of how it came to be that you're the guy running this thing for Netflix.
Look, I mean, it's sort of crazy. Yeah, is what it is. Look, I started out in the theater. I wrote a play called Farragut North that was based really on my experiences, very low level working in politics. That became a film called Ides of March. And that
George Clooney, Ryan Gosling, really good film.
Yeah. I mean, Clooney, I owe a lot of debt to for pulling that together. It's the sort of film that studios typically don't make these days. And that led to House of Cards.
All right, you skipped a step, dude. Somebody called you and said, David Fincher called you.
That's right. So David Fincher had teamed up with MRC, Media Rights Capital, which is sort of like a studio without a lot. They owned the underlying rights. And so Fincher and I got on the phone. We shared a lot of the same ideas. We decided to team up. I worked in very covert secrecy for a year on the script. We got Kevin and Robin on board, and then we went to find a home. Netflix doesn't actually own the show. MRC does. They license it. And so we had a script. We had 2 bankable stars. We had one of the greatest living directors on the planet. And Netflix was able to say, all right, if we combine all of these elements, we think we have the recipe, not necessarily for a hit show, but enough interest that people will at least watch the beginning of it. And if it doesn't completely suck, maybe they'll watch the rest of it.
And here's hoping, I guess, right? Did you go in and say, listen, we want a 1-season deal and we're not going to shoot a pilot? Or
We said that to everyone. Initially we sat down with the AMC, Showtime, and HBO. We were very strategic sort of when we leaked this project to the press and gave them the material. And we said, we don't want to audition. I mean, it's kind of a hubristic thing to say, but we said if we're going to pour ourselves into this, we want to know we have at least a full season. That was very unorthodox for them at the time. I mean, all of those networks wanted to do it, but they didn't want to set the precedent for a full season order. And we said we'd rather walk away than not. Netflix came in and we said we want a full season order, and they said, oh yeah, no problem, 2 seasons.
Wow.
So now what you're seeing a lot of is places like HBO or other networks are doing full season orders now.
And Netflix is doing them again. I mean, Orange is the New Black and all of that stuff. You are, as the showrunner, the guy who sits between the executives who have all that data and the rest of the creative staff. How do you filter what they need to know about how they are doing? I mean, they get the adulation in the press, and I'm sure Kevin and Robin read all this stuff, but how do you sort of calibrate that?
No one sits, I'm on set every day, from the first day to 100, day 155 or whatever it is. Never, I can honestly say, if any of us sat around saying, gosh, we really knew what these numbers were. We believe
Which is so funny, because broadcast television, you can't turn around without somebody saying, oh, well, your cum last night, and your, the overnights and all this stuff.
It's like you can't get addicted to heroin if it's not available to you, It's like...
That's true. That's true.
I mean...
do you worry about getting addicted to the numbers? If you knew, would you...
Yeah, well, I have an addictive personality, like I mean, I could get addicted to like coming to Aspen Ideas Festival.
We all could,
tomorrow.
dude.
Yeah.
We all could.
I mean, look, I have friends that are constantly contending with these numbers who work on traditional broadcast networks, and I think that they wish they didn't have to deal with those numbers more often than not. All we really care about, I mean, it's like a little bubble, is the work that we're trying to do that day, trying to tell the best story we can. We're constantly contending with our own sense of self-doubt and self-loathing, which is far worse than dealing with any data set. And ultimately, as long as someone is willing to keep paying for us to do the thing that we love and hate ourselves for doing, then we're good to go.
Wow, I need to go to work there very quickly before I let you go, because I know you have places to be. You're shooting season 3 now, right?
That's right. We're about a month into filming season 3.
And when do we get it?
I wish I could tell you.
Oh, man. Come on.
That is a piece of data I do know, but I can't share yet.
Beau Willimon, thanks very much for your time. Really appreciate it. So this is going to sound a little bit, I don't know, counterintuitive, I suppose. But for as much as we like to think of numbers as cold, hard, objective facts, the truth is that they often come with layers, nuances that take time to figure out. So with that in mind, here is a number for you to consider. 76 billion. That is denominated in dollars. It is how much the government spent on food stamps last year. It is more money, in fact, than we have ever spent on food stamps. And here is one of those nuances, one of those layers. We spent 8 times as much on the defense budget last year as we did on food stamps. But we will eventually spend less on food stamps as the economy gets better. But here's another layer for you. More people, especially working people with full-time permanent jobs, are on food stamps and using them now than ever before. So Chrissy Clark from our Wealth and Poverty team has been following the flow of all those food stamp dollars, where they ultimately go in our economy. Chrissy, thanks for coming on.
Nice to be here.
So walk us through the secret life of a food stamp dollar, if you would.
Okay, but first, Kai, have you ever met a food stamp dollar?
No, I never have.
Well,
okay.
Let me introduce you to one. Let's call him Fred.
It's a fish, Chrissy. Okay, Fred the fish, the food stamp dollar.
It's going to make sense.
Go ahead.
So, Kai meet Fred, Fred meet Kai.
Fred.
So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Fred. At first, he is just like any other taxpayer dollar sitting in the US Treasury, awaiting his fate. Will he fund a fighter plane, maybe a highway? But then, once a month, at the stroke of midnight, some lines of computer code get triggered. And in that instant, hundreds of millions of dollars, taxpayer dollars, like Fred, get zapped into little plastic cards.
Yeah, we should say, actually, they are cards. It's all electronic now, no more food stamps.
Right. They used to be food stamps.
Right.
Now the government uses electronic debit cards. But most people still call them food stamps. And at the stroke of midnight, these cards get zapped with a recharge of money while they're tucked into the wallets and purses of Americans all over the country. And that is when Fred's life as a food stamp dollar begins.
Okay.
Depending on where you live, the same thing is happening at different midnights throughout the month until nearly 47 million Americans receive their monthly allotment of food stamp dollars.
Which is, for some context here, 1 out of every 7 Americans, plus or minus.
Yeah, it's a lot of people. Yeah. And just to give you a little background, to qualify for these benefits, it means you're living right around the poverty line, no more than about $25,000 a year for a household of 3. The average person gets about $130 a month. And after these cards get recharged with money, food stamp dollars, like Fred, begin their long, often very complicated journey through the economy.
All right, well, I feel bad for Fred in the map. What is the first stop, do you suppose?
So, as you might guess, one of the first legs of the journey, often within minutes after midnight, is a trip to the grocery store, in the pocket of someone like Stephanie Ballum from Columbus, Ohio. Stephanie, like millions of shoppers, goes to Walmart, where you can get really good deals on food.
Yep. Quaker oatmeal, $2.50. Mini ravioli, 98 cents.
And this is stuff that she buys with her food stamp dollars. And I'll tell you a little bit more about Stephanie. You might call her Fred the food stamp dollar's first entry point into the economy. So Stephanie has a college degree and a full-time job, but it doesn't pay much. She lives right around the poverty line, and she still qualifies for food stamps.
I'd rather be off of it, but it's a necessary thing. And I think that's the way it is for a lot of people.
And in fact, Stephanie is part of the fastest growing group of people on food stamps today, people with steady jobs that don't pay much. And I'm going to get a little deeper into that fact in a minute, but for now I'm actually going to skip past that part of the story to get to a stage in Fred the food stamp dollar's life that we hear much less about.
Why are we skipping past recipients? Isn't that what food stamps are all about, right?
Right, well, that's one part of it. And a lot of times, that's all that we hear about Fred the food stamp's life. But in fact, that is just the very first part of his journey. He lives for a brief moment in the wallet of someone like Stephanie Ballum, but almost immediately, he gets spent.
Insert cash or select payment type.
Right, and it's clearly he doesn't just disappear once he gets spent, right?
Right.
He's still in the economy.
He becomes revenue, lots and lots of revenue for businesses. That record $76 billion that the US spent on food stamps last year, that money flowed from the US Treasury into people's food stamp cards, and then on into the cash registers of more than 200,000 stores that have each been approved by the federal government to participate in the food stamp program.
And this, of course, is the secret life, then, of the food stamp dollar that you're
Right.
talking about. Right.
And in fact, you can kind of think of Fred the food stamp as a government subsidy with a double life, which is why he needs a disguise.
Got it.
So first, he is a subsidy for poor people to buy food, but then he's a stimulus for corporations that sell that food at a profit. So I want to walk you through how Fred the food stamp's second secret life really works.
All right, so let's go back to the nights then when those cards get recharged. What happens sort of on the other end of that transaction?
Okay, so here's a memorable detail that a guy named Anthony Pettiford once told me. He used to work at a Kroger supermarket in Dayton, Ohio, and he says he could actually hear Fred and his food stamp dollar friends coming.
It's funny because the noise that a cart makes when it's stacked and it's heavy is this loud squeaking noise, and that's all you hear in the stores. Yeah, it's just mind-numbing.
So meanwhile, store inventory needs to follow the rhythm of those food stamp dollars. So stores have realized that on food stamp recharge days, basic staples like bread and milk and meat and cheese fly off the shelves. So stores stock up on them since they don't want to lose sales.
Do we know how much stores make off of food stamps? I mean, who gets what and how much?
Well, that's where things get even more secret. So stores do track food stamp sales,
right,
but they won't share the data. They say that it's basically a trade secret. And the federal government also tracks food stamp sales, but they won't share the data either, which is a little bit unusual because normally when a business participates in a government program, you can find out how much they're getting paid.
Right. You can look up what it costs to build a government road, right? You can look up what a fighter jet costs. I mean, those costs are all known. They're public.
Right,
Yeah.
right. But in the case of food stamps, it's confidential. The USDA says that they are forbidden by law from sharing how much stores make off food stamp sales. Recently, actually, a federal judge ruled that the USDA has been misinterpreting that law, but for now, the issue is still tied up in court.
So to be clear, for now, we still don't know how much money companies are making from food stamps.
Right, but what I've discovered in my reporting is that those food stamp dollars really matter to businesses.
What? I'm sorry, is that you?
It
You're kidding,
is,
right?
and it's for you, Kai.
Yes, of course it is, sure. Hello?
Hi, this is Carol Schumacher, Vice President of Investor Relations for Walmart Stores, Inc.
Hi, Carol.
So that is not really
It's not.
Carol
Okay, all
live
right,
on
good.
the phone right now. Here,
All
I'll
right,
take my
there's your
phone
phone
back.
All right.
But that is Carol's voice from a recorded shareholders call from a few months ago. And it's calls like these that have been highlighting the bottom line value of food stamps to retail stores. So maybe you remember that late last year, Congress reduced food stamp benefits, which are officially called SNAP, for Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. And Congress cut those benefits by about $30 a family.
Right, it was a big deal.
Yeah,
Big deal.
and so soon after that, on this call that we were just hearing a bit of, Walmart announced disappointing quarterly sales. Executives blamed the slump on two key things: bad weather and
SNAP benefit reduction.
The reduction in SNAP benefits.
The reduction in SNAP that really hit us in the fourth quarter
Yeah, the point to make here is if they're going to Wall Street analysts with this, that's a real hit to their profits if that's what they're saying on the record.
Yeah, and it's not just then, of course. Food stamps have become baked into the business models of more and more big-name stores since the beginning of the Great Recession. CEOs at Costco, at Family Dollar, have all talked about how valuable food stamps are for their business. But it is Walmart that likely receives the most in food stamp dollars. In fact, when I interviewed them, Walmart confirmed it takes in an estimated 18% of all food stamp spending. That would have amounted to $13 billion last year, or about 4% of Walmart's total US sales.
And if you play that out through the economy, Chrissy, right, there is sort of a trickle-down effect, not to use a loaded phrase, but that's kind of what happens, right?
Right. It probably helps out with that GDP number that you and Patty were talking about earlier. In a tough economy, stores sell more food thanks to Fred the food stamp and his friends. They pocket some of that money as profit, but some goes to pay farmers who supply the food, to truckers who move the food.
And then there are the workers who stock the food at the market, right? Some of that money goes to their paychecks.
Right. But let's talk about those workers and their paychecks for a moment. Because it turns out that many of the same companies who benefit the most in food stamp revenue also have some of the largest workers using the food stamp program because their paychecks are not enough to make ends meet. In fact, remember Stephanie Ballum, that woman from Columbus, Ohio, who first encountered Fred the food stamp.
Yeah, you bet.
So that box of oatmeal, those cans of mini ravioli that she used Fred the food stamp to buy, is food that she might have put on the shelves herself during her job.
She works at Walmart, which is the company that gets the most money in food stamp receipts and revenues, right?
Yes, she does. But because her paycheck for a full-time job there still lands her close to the poverty line, she is also on food stamps.
Which she uses at Walmart because that's what she has to do to get by.
Right.
And it's revenue for the company then.
Right.
Yeah.
And around.
And around. And I'll tell you what, it sort of, I feel bad for Fred. It sort of does make your head explode a little bit, you know?
Maybe a little like this.
Okay, well, I wasn't actually thinking nuclear weapons, but no. Okay, we'll go with that.
But it does start to make your brain hurt. As I was reporting on this, it was like following the money gets a little hard.
How typical is it, right, for these stories like Stephanie Ballum's to happen, right? How many workers at Walmart and other companies that benefit from food stamps are we talking about who are actually on food stamps themselves? Do we know?
It's actually very hard to say. So the federal government does not keep those numbers. A few states do, though, actually, and that's why I did a lot of my reporting in Ohio. Ohio keeps a list of the 50 companies with the most workers and their family members on food stamps. So no surprise, there are lots of fast food chains and retail stores on the list. But at the very top, in terms of sheer numbers of workers and family members on food stamps, is Walmart. If you do a little number crunching, the data suggests that around 15% of the company's workforce in this state is on food stamps.
You went down to Bentonville, Arkansas, the home of the Walmart Corporation, asked them about this, what they had to say.
So here's David Tovar. He's the vice president of communications for Walmart.
I think it's troubling that any American has to turn to a program like that, but the fact is they do.
So the deal is that Walmart's the biggest private employer, right, in the state of Ohio, biggest private employer in the country. So it kind of makes sense that it has the most workers on food stamps. The obvious solution, though, is why don't they just raise the paychecks?
Well, I asked him about that, and he told me, look, the retail sector works on very thin profit margins, and he argues it's always going to have entry-level jobs that don't pay much, but...
It's really not where you start. I think it's where you end up.
And in fact, I've met some Walmart workers who started in entry-level jobs on food stamps and eventually did work their way off them as they got promotions. But here's one final point that I want to leave you guys with. There was a time in the US not so long ago when the economy worked really differently than this low-skilled, low-paid food stamp cycle that we're talking about now. Let's go back a few decades.
All right.
Reverse
Here we go. All right.
the explosion.
That's much better.
But this is serious. So a few decades ago, where you started, even in an entry-level job, like the kind that David Tovar of Walmart was talking about, even in an entry-level job, you could afford a very different life. In fact, before the largest employer in Ohio and the country was Walmart, it was, does anybody know? General Motors.
General Motors. Yeah.
And back when GM was the biggest employer around, it would not have ranked as a top food stamp employer.
Do you know, how much do we know about starting wages back then, right?
Fred is saying goodbye.
Oh,
right
see you, Fred. Bye.
So I spoke to one guy at GM.
Okay.
He worked at a GM factory, started there in Ohio in the early 1990s. His starting wage, this is in like 1991, was $9.35 an hour, which is the equivalent of about $17 an hour today.
Right.
So compare that to Stephanie Ballum 2 decades later. When she started working for Walmart, she was making $7.25 an hour.
Yeah, so forget about the inflation-adjusted number, right? Even in nominal dollars, it still doesn't match. In fact, it's less, which is mind-boggling.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's that difference between an economy dominated by relatively high-paying manufacturing jobs compared to today's economy, which is fueled by relatively low-paying service jobs. That difference goes a very long way to explaining why the fastest growing group of people on food stamps today are people who have steady jobs, like Stephanie. And Kai, there was this one phrase that Stephanie used, and so did a lot of working people that I talked to who were on food stamps, and it really stuck with me. They told me, I work hard for my food stamps.
Chrissy Clark from the Wealth and Poverty Desk. Chrissy, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Crazy piece. No, go ahead. So when you're talking about numbers, it is easy to get wrapped up in the details, lost in the minutia, if you will. But there is a way to think about numbers that is more big picture, that can take an idea and kind of run with it. They can foster ambition, create opportunities, and maybe bring big change. And that is why our next guest is here. Jennifer Pahlka, as the sign says, is the founder of Code for America. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Really
Very
appreciate
glad
it.
to be here.
As a way of you telling these good people what it is that Code for America does, I want you to tell me about the possums in Boston.
Oh, the possums in
possums
Boston.
in
I was
Boston.
hoping you would ask me about food stamps.
Possums in Boston. If you got a food stamp story, we'll go there next.
So we worked with the city of Boston back in 2011, and we did a whole bunch of really great things with these guys. We take these folks from the tech industry, so developers, designers who would otherwise be at Google or Apple or at a startup, and say, you're going to give a year of service to your country, and you're going to work with city government. And one of the things we have them do is sit on the call centers in these cities and take the phone calls from citizens that are asking about what's going on.
So, you know, in LA and in Boston, you can dial 311 and say, you know, I got a pothole on my street or the street lighted out or whatever.
So one of the fellows, a guy named Scott Silverman, they get a wide range of calls, in fact, quite frequently about food stamps. But one of the guys got a really different call. Somebody said, I have a possum in my house and I don't know what to do about it. And so these guys have computers in front of them. They're supposed to look up in the city of Boston knowledge base what you do. And so there is information in that knowledge base about animal control, and maybe you can send someone out to take care of this possum. But Scott said, I have an idea. Why don't you just turn on all of the radio and TV in your house and all on blast and blast the thing out of the house. And so that worked, which was great, but we also found that possums have this thing in Boston because he found that somebody else had used the 311 system on a phone, so the digital system.
There's an app, right? Yeah.
There's an app for this called Citizens Connect in Boston. So someone else had a possum problem as well.
In a garbage can.
In
right?
a garbage can, a dead possum. And so they wrote in on this app, what do I do about this dead possum in my garbage can? And again, so the response would be you would send out city services, you know, it ends up costing a lot, you're sending out people who are doing a full-time job. But instead of the city responding, a neighbor saw that post on Citizens Connect and said, so about 5 minutes later you see this other response on this request that says, I walked by your house, I turned over your garbage can, the possum's fine, he walked away, good night.
Good night, boom. And that all becomes because of this app that Code for America fellows did. Not to put too fine a point on it, and I get that there's a larger mission of making government work better, full stop. But there's a dollars and cents calculation here, right, to get it back to the numbers. I mean, we spend a lot of money in this country, and if we can do stuff better because of technology and because of Code for America, then that's what you're in the mood for.
Yeah, we think that it's about $172 billion a year that's spent on technology.
That's a big, big number.
In government, that's federal, state, and local. And if that number were getting us really great websites, great web apps that made it really easy for us to do things like pay taxes or report the possum or receive our food stamps, I think that would be a fine number. But I don't think many of us here, especially after the last year, would say that the digital interfaces to citizens that the government provides are really worth $172 billion investment.
What does it look like then when you, in, I don't know, 20 years, when Code for America is a big established thing and your fellows have done their magic all over the country, what does it look like? How are you going to know?
Well, I think you know, first and foremost, not so much by numbers, but by having the tech that you use to communicate with government be as good or better than what you use at home or what you use on Facebook or what you use to call a cab or, I mean, frankly, you know, how you adjust your thermostat. Tony said this, you know, when it's beautiful. So we have a line. Interfaces to government should be simple, beautiful, and easy to use. And when they are, you care about what you're doing. Right. You feel there's value in it. And it turns out that actually feeling that there's value in those interfaces will mean that you feel that there's value in government. But it's not just that they look pretty and that they're simple and easy to use. They should cost less. And you know, we had this experience this year with healthcare.gov.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what I think many people don't realize.
So let me just insert here. So you spent the past year at the White House as the Deputy Chief Technology Officer of the United States of America, right?
I did.
So you were kind of looking at this healthcare.gov stuff going,
a little. Yes.
Not quite so benignly, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it was a really difficult situation because you had people who were trying very, very hard, who cared very much about healthcare for the rest of Americans, and yet the processes that we have put in place don't result in these digital services that work. And for a lot of us who work in government technology, this wasn't a surprise. You could see the way they were planning it. You could see what they were doing, and we've sort of seen this maybe before. It doesn't work out very well, but there is a better way to do it. You can actually get people to create something like healthcare.gov on a much smaller team with a different way of working and have it work beautifully. And we should be insisting on that.
When you call these prospective fellows in your recruitment, or even when they call you, what's the pitch when you say, we want you to take a leave of absence from your job, take a modest stipend from us, and serve your country? What's the response?
You know, we don't have to pitch them very hard. These are people who could be making far, far more money, doing something much more glamorous. They're coming to us. We get about 700 applicants a year for 30 slots, so we get to be very picky about who's a Code for America fellow. They know instinctively what we see, which is that if we don't make government work in the implementation, we don't have a functional democracy. And they know that's what's at stake, and they want to fix it.
Do the people in government understand that's what's at stake? Because, you know, the perception abroad in the country is that Washington's a little out of touch.
Washington's a little out of touch, but I think there are amazing people in Washington who definitely understand and definitely care. We have a system in Washington that is built on the idea that you will do policy, and then the people who do the policy will hand things down through layers and layers of process and implementation, ultimately to a bunch of geeks. So it's the geeks that we recruit. Those are the people that we think. And when you do that over a long period of time, we call it the waterfall method, and it's that's what it's called in software development. Unfortunately, as my friend Clay Shirky has said, the waterfall method amounts to a pledge by all parties not to learn anything while doing the actual work. And that piece of being able to learn while you're doing it matters a lot. And so what I'm really hoping is that after healthcare.gov at the federal level, but certainly for a million different things that we do at the state and local level, that the people who will do policy, will start to understand that that ability to learn, which is very much prefaced on having the data, is critical to making government services work for the people they're supposed to serve.
Jennifer Pahlka from Code for America. Jennifer, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. So numbers are fundamentally utilitarian, right? They tell us things about the economic world around us. And that goes for the whole economic world, right? And our own little slices of it. Because not only are there big systemic numbers like GDP that Patty and I were talking about, but there are smaller, no less important numbers as well. One of the most basic of those, you might credibly call it the basic building block of the consumer economy, is your credit score. You've got one, I've got one, and Marketplace's Adrienne Hill has one. And here she is. Hey, Adrienne.
Hey, Kai.
All right, so what's your credit score number?
No way.
Come on.
Absolutely no way.
It's just a number.
Yeah, it's a really big number. Telling you my credit score, Kai, would tell you way too much about me. And you'd probably be all judgy if I came in low, right?
No.
And if I came super high, you'd probably think a little bit more of me.
Also no.
We can see what you're thinking.
Oh, she is amazing, but that's not what I'm thinking. All right, go ahead.
My credit score wouldn't just tell you my amazingness or non-amazingness.
Okay.
Here's John Oltzheimer, a credit expert at creditsesame.com.
Okay.
It controls everything from the terms and interest rates on loans, your access to mainstream loans, what you pay on your insurance premiums for your
And
homeowners.
Kai, John's a great guy,
still
but he
talking.
goes on
I
and
know.
on
He's
and
still
on
talking.
here. I mean, that's because this is a really, really big list.
It's not overblown to call the credit score one of the most important financial metrics that
Wow.
we now live with.
All right.
Apparently, some people actually use credit scores now to decide who to date. So
No,
800
come on, really?
plus, oh yeah, 800 plus, bring them home to mom.
No
like
way.
they're
No
a
way.
winner. So me and my credit score, we're staying very private.
How did it come to pass then that we let this one number have so much control over our lives? I don't get that.
It's a good question, and to answer it, I'd like us all to go back in time to the 1960s.
Okay. All right. I'm game. Oh, no, wait. Me too?
You too.
All right. I'm not dancing. I don't dance in public. I will wear a silly hat. All right.
So,
What is this?
Kai, you
Yes.
are a banker, and these two lovely people are
right.
looking for a loan.
Okay.
Who? I've only got money in my pocket here for one of them.
Okay.
Who gets it?
Give me their credit scores. That's a.
There are no FICO credit scores yet.
Oh, because
On
we're
you.
in the 60s.
Back
okay.
to you.
Okay, let's see. What's your favorite color?
Rainbow.
Okay. You, sir?
I'm a green man.
Green. Okay, very good. Does anybody have military experience?
I was in the Marines. That's practically the Navy, so we're like
Practically.
cousins,
All right, well,
right?
that's well. Let's not get that
My
carried away.
my
You?
dad was in the Navy.
Yeah. Okay. Too far away. I'm going to go with my Green Marine here.
All righty,
All right,
my
he gets
friend.
the money.
Congratulations.
There you go. Good.
Sorry,
You lose.
rainbow lover.
Okay, that's the craziest thing ever. That's how it's decided.
That is pretty much what bankers did. Here's John again to
All right.
explain.
You almost always did business with a banker who was a friend of the family or someone with whom you golfed or someone with whom your parents worked or you went to the church with or in the Rotary Club with. And you would just sit down and discuss your needs, and they would make a decision based largely on a gut feel, if you will.
That's the silliest thing I've ever heard, honestly.
It's
Especially
crazy.
that picture right there. That picture's bananas.
It's a good gut.
Can we go back to today now, please? Can I get this hat off? All right,
Absolutely,
good. All right,
absolutely.
good. Yeah, I don't know what's with that picture, but that's all right. All right.
So handing out cash in that way was really subjective in a way that left a lot of people out of the credit market based on gender, race, nationality, marital status. There were far less sophisticated credit reports out there that basically banks got by calling around and reading the newspaper. And we're talking about things like drinking and personal cleanliness.
Wow.
The Fair Credit Reporting Act was passed in the 70s, and the FICO credit score that we all live with today came along in the 80s.
Which is clearly an improvement over me just winging it, right? Me and my gut?
Yeah, it's better, but...
Okay, what's with the telenovela music? I don't understand that.
It is easy to fall in love with numbers, to trust them. And a FICO credit score is absolutely better than your gut. It's standardized. The rules are set. It doesn't matter who served in the Marines or who likes rainbows or who likes green or who doesn't shower every day.
Okay.
But it is not perfect.
But we time traveled, and you showed me that it was better, and it was like a special thing.
It was.
It was
It was
special.
very
It was
special.
very special.
Thank you all for time
Yes.
traveling. And that's true. But maybe we should think about whether or not those credit scores have just a little bit more power than we ought to give them. For one, your FICO score doesn't include your salary, your employment history, child support, whether or not you're in credit counseling. Here's Chi-Chi Wu. She's an attorney at the National Consumer Law Center. She calls credit scores a blunt instrument, especially considering we've just come through the financial crisis.
There were a lot of consumers who lost their jobs, and because they lost their jobs, they couldn't keep up with their bills, and they've had damaged credit records.
And those folks who lost their jobs, they're not the credit risk as bad as somebody who just walks away from their payments, right? That's not the same deal.
Exactly. That's Wu's point. But FICO scores, they just don't distinguish.
So what do you do? How do you fix that?
Well, you can ask lenders to take those kind of extenuating circumstances more seriously. And Wu also thinks credit scores probably don't need to look back quite as long as they do. Right now, negative information sticks to report for 7 years. There's no reason, she says, it needs to be on there that long.
There's no magic about that 7-year limit. And one thing you could do to help people who've suffered in the Great Recession or the foreclosure crisis is to shorten that amount of time. I believe in a couple of other countries they have shorter time limits. Sweden's 3 years, Germany's 4 years, and those are fairly healthy economies.
So I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Patty about GDP, right? Do I love this number? Do I hate it? Do I stop worrying about it? What do I do? Help me out.
I can't tell you who and what to love, Kai.
All right.
But go in eyes open. Numbers seem clean. They seem perfect. They seem less judgy, like they tell us everything we need to know. But they don't. They aren't. You gotta understand them in context and then decide how much power and love to give them.
All right.
And Kai, what's your credit score?
After that, I am so not telling you my credit score. Forget it. Adrian Hill, thank you so much, Adrian. We appreciate it. So we have been on the air, Marketplace has, for 25 years, as I said up at the top. And in that entire time, there's only one segment that's been on every single broadcast that we have done. It is that 45 seconds or so that comes after I say, but first, let's do the numbers. And yes, somebody was doing that along with me. That was absolutely weird. And we know that the Dow is not the economy and the economy is not the Dow, right? We get that. So why, you might fairly ask, do we do it? Why do we do the numbers like that? Why do we do the numbers as we do them on the broadcast at all? Well, we do it because they're part of a larger whole, right? The idea that if we do our jobs right, you get a sense of what's happening behind the numbers, behind the daily and the weekly and the monthly fluctuations. Because the economic narrative, right, both here in the United States and globally, is complicated. And if we can help you figure it out, right, if we can help you learn to stop worrying and love the numbers, well then, we'll just call that a win, all right? That is all we've got for tonight. It was an hour of your time. We appreciate it. We are going to have dessert and an open bar out back. There's wine and cheese and all that good stuff. Please help yourselves. We'd love to chat and touch base with you about what you like about the broadcast, what you don't, and what you want to hear more of. Thank you all so much for coming tonight.